floor is yours.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you very much for inviting me. I know we have about 12 minutes, so I'm going to fly through this presentation. But I have some very simple points to make. And I was asked to comment as a stakeholder. I represent the Swedish Agency for Innovation Systems, but I'm also a researcher at the University in Lund, where I look at dynamics of internationalization of innovation and research. So I was asked, international dimension of ERA, do we need to tackle jointly the societal challenges? And my answer to that is obviously yes. I think it's a no-brainer. So the global cooperation is absolutely necessary to tackle societal challenges. But my first point is that we tend to remain at this very lofty level of let's work together to address societal challenges. But at the end of the day, most of these societal challenges need to be addressed through concrete products and solutions. And there tends to be a big gap between even very successful research, international research products, and actually trickling down to a concrete solution. So that's my first point. And my second point is that realizing and strengthening the ERA is a vital prerequisite for Europe's future welfare. We've heard this today. I think everybody agrees on that. Again, there's no discussion. But I would argue we must be very careful not to forget the international dimension. And the reason I say that is because, A, as we've heard today, the center of gravity, the dynamics of innovation and science are shifting. Europe's share of global science is shrinking. It's because countries such as China, India, and Brazil are increasing. So that's my first point. The second point is when you look at Europe's linkages with the new global innovation and research hubs, Europe's linkages are underdeveloped. They're much smaller than they could and should be given the rising importance of these countries in terms of science and innovation. And my third point is when I look at the European policies, particularly, for example, Horizon 2020, I'm concerned because I don't see an increased level of ambition for international cooperation compared with FP7, not a significantly increased. So those essentially are my points, and the rest of the slides are just to try to illustrate that. First of all, when we talk about societal challenges, I was at the Global Innovation Roundtable. This was a meeting convened by the advisor to India's Prime Minister, Sam Pitroda. He's India's Prime Minister's innovation advisor. He convened the Global Innovation Roundtable. And one of the things that became extremely clear to me there is that I think we have a slightly Eurocentric way of talking about societal challenges. We really need to think about, I've listed here the ones that come from Horizon 2020, health, demography, well-being, innovative and secure societies. You can see the list of it. I think we all know them. But if you turn to countries like India, in India, aging is certainly not a problem. I didn't hear very many people in this Global Innovation Roundtable talking about, to be honest, talking about energy conservation or environmental technology. I heard them talk about combating poverty. That's it. You know, how can we alleviate poverty in India? When you go to China, security, the Chinese government has a very different definition of security and ensuring a secure society or even internet security. But I think what we need to think about is that when we talk about societal challenges, whose challenges are we talking about and how are these actually perceived in other parts of the world? And even when you go from here to the US, you might find a difference. My second point there, what I was mentioning before, is that global challenges require very concrete and very often very local solutions. So here I just listed as an example is a problem that is well known and has been around for a long time, which is that more than 1 billion people in the world lack access to safe water. The solution, which has been found by this is just an example by a Swedish entrepreneur, is a container which uses nothing but sunshine to clean the water. Now, you would think this is not super revolutionary. It took 10 years to develop. Interestingly, it was developed by a designer, not by a scientist, but in extreme close cooperation with science. And what it showed was that, and the insights from this process coming up with this container, which is now very successfully being distributed through aid funding agencies to users in different countries, is that you need to work with the users for years and years to understand how you can actually find a concrete solution to a societal challenge. Another example is the Jaipur limb. You might have heard of it, but you know that the artificial limbs in the Western world tend to cost several thousands of dollars. It's when an Indian foundation came in and started funding Indian researchers to work with Stanford University that they created this limb, which cost $45. So this, again, is a very concrete solution. And the last two examples are, one is a fetal heart rate monitor, which monitors an infant's during the birth. It monitors the baby's heart rate, and it's the key is that it's mechanically powered, so you don't need electricity. And the other one is an incubator. And the interesting thing is that none of these are scientific breakthroughs, or the breakthrough happened a long time ago, but they have contributed tremendously to addressing challenges such as premature death from childbirth, or infant mortality death, or complications at birth. And the question then becomes, you know, if everybody knows that these are challenges and we have the science, why does it take so long for these to be transformed into concrete solutions? And I think this, therefore, one of the challenges we have is that developing successful solutions to address social challenges requires the proximity to users. And McKinsey wrote about this in 2009, this new trend that companies are realizing that they can no longer develop products in Europe or the US and then just sort of sell them, you know, with a Chinese manual or an Indian manual to different countries. They're realizing they actually have to move their R&D there in order to be able to develop the products for these consumers. And so the challenge for Europe then becomes, you know, how do you tackle jointly societal challenges, ideally perhaps in the process benefiting European industry or designing products that are relevant when the users are increasingly found outside Europe. And so the other point I'm trying to make is we need to look at who and what is driving innovation, who and what drives innovation, who did it yesterday and who's doing it tomorrow. And yesterday, this is a picture of L.M. Ericsson, the person who founded Ericsson. You know, yesterday I'm being a little polemic, but in the past, it was generally white, older men that drove innovation, both in science and in starting companies. In the future, the question is, will it be the young Indians, because they have this massive accumulation of skills that is just exploding with all the new institutes that are being founded, and with their increasing purchasing power as a new middle class driving consumption? Will it be the aging Chinese, which are just going to increase in quantity and again in purchasing power? Or will it be the National People's Congress in China? And one of the things that has been mentioned many times, but in fact, you know, China last year invested 1.8% of its GDP in R&D. If nothing dramatic happens, it will overtake the EU 27 investment in R&D expenditure, I would say by next year. And okay, we can talk about how efficient are these investments, but there you are. I think today we spent a lot of time talking about how efficient are our investments. So what happens is that there are new forms of innovation that are arising outside Europe, but with profound implications for Europe. The first one is this reverse innovation, where multinational firms are realizing that they used to design and develop products here and then export them to the poor countries. And now they're realizing they might actually have to turn it around. So this infant incubator that I showed you was developed in India, but is now being exported to the US. The other one is this frugal or grassroots innovation that is being driven in India, where the slogan is getting more from less for many, which is the whole idea that whatever you make, it has to be technology, it has to be sophisticated, but it has to be affordable. And the last one is this slightly concerning notion from China, independent innovation, where the whole idea is to reduce the dependence on technology from the West. So when we then turn to Europe's linkages, and I'm almost finished, we can see that Europe's links with these new global research and innovation hubs are actually underdeveloped. And this is from a policy brief, which I think is very interesting, from Reinhilde Woichelas, which says that the EU's collaboration with China remains at a far lower level than it could be, considering the growth of China's scientific power, and that by contrast, intra-EU collaboration has actually increased substantially. And she's sort of hinting that we need to think about whether we're increasing intra-EU collaboration, sometimes at the expense of the linkages with countries outside Europe. And is that something we want? And then her conclusion is that the EU, to a great extent, remains on the sidelines of the globalization of science process. I've looked at co-publications of Europe with different regions. I'm not going to go into this. I'll just show you this one, which shows co-publications with China, and on the top left, and then on the bottom left, co-publications with leading Chinese universities. And basically what it shows is that Europe's co-publications are much smaller, much less than the US's, and they're increasing at a slower rate. So not only do we have fewer, but the dynamics are not moving in the right direction. This, again, I'm sorry I'm flying through it, but this is material sciences in the top 20 material science journals in the world, just to show that, you know, the increase in China in terms of share of publications in the top 20 material sciences. So we're not only talking about an increase in quantity, but also an increase in quality. And then when we turn to the European instruments and programs, This is a quote from the Rolf Annabach report, the interim evaluation of FP7, where they said that the total budgetary contribution to all participants in the BRICS countries in FP7 is around 85 million, which can be compared to the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. It's been said a lot, sometimes in Commission quarters also, that the framework program is not a program for internationalization, and I think we should really discuss that. But I agree that it isn't today because we only have about 5% third country participants, and that's not very, very much higher than FP6. I think I'm at the end. So the point is, I would say that the biggest risk, some people say we shouldn't exaggerate with the crisis, and I agree. I think perhaps the biggest risk of the crisis is that it makes us inward-looking at a time when actually science and innovation dynamics are just exploding outside Europe. So our importance is diminishing, other countries are climbing up the ladder, and we're sort of perhaps sometimes a little too concerned with what's happening here and our needs and our challenges when, you know, perhaps what I'm saying is that we need to realize the era. I think there's no, as again I said, I think it's no question. The era, realization and completing the era is absolutely necessary, but we need to make sure that we don't just go away and work on this internal stuff, and when we're done, then we embrace, or then we invite the rest of the world to come and talk to us, because the dynamics are sort of, time is sort of working against us. The last point is I think we should use Horizon 2020 much more strategically as a vehicle for internationalization and for promoting actor-driven innovation. And these are things that are being discussed, but consider using public procurement, which is being discussed in the Innovation Union, as a tool for perhaps for procuring concrete solutions to societal challenges. I apologize for the speed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia.